Hello, welcome into this space, into this place where you can connect to the presence of your being, your energy, and your light. My intention really is that this provides an opportunity and a place where you can connect to yourself rather than having me dictate and tell you what to think. I share my experiences to give context, to give realistic human perspective to what's going on, but it's never to encourage anyone to conform to the way that I experience things or my ways of thinking. We are each individuals. We have, as I've said, we're having different experiences based on our realities. And yet oftentimes there are common energies that are running, let's say, through the fields that we are all picking up on. And this is really where I want to come from, in the sense that we are feeling similar things and they will be playing out differently based on our perceptions, based on our understandings, and based on our level of self-awareness. And what I really want to speak to today is this transitioning that we are experiencing. Yesterday evening, out of nowhere, intense anger rising up through my body. And I was sitting on the couch with my daughter. We were watching a movie. I was trying to watch this movie and feeling incredibly distracted. Kept looking at my phone. I kept getting more and more agitated. And I finally just decided to turn off my phone completely. It's not a feeling that I haven't experienced before. I've experienced this quite a few times in the past. This rising agitation. Not connected to anything in my reality. It's an underlying energy. So I decided to turn my phone off, which is not something I often do. It's very rare that I will do that. But when I do, I experience this massive relief, such a sigh of relief and release within myself. And of course, these are things we hear all the time. Disconnect from technology and social media and this and that. And we know these things, and yet it's still challenging to do. There is a fear sometimes of missing out on some kind of information, some kind of update, something. Although I find for myself, oftentimes when I wake up in the morning, it's more an energy of, okay, what has come in through the night? What kind of emails, messages, whatever have I received? And I have literally found myself thinking, okay, what direction is my day going to go in today based on what has happened overnight? Even though I know, right, I am the designer, the creator of my own day, there is still that default programming to look and to expect my day to be influenced by some kind of outside force. So this is a period for many of us where we are really transitioning, and really it's being brought to the forefront of our awareness to see this on a almost moment-to-moment level. I woke up this morning feeling incredibly sick to my stomach, but also knowing I had to push through this and get out of bed and make my day what it needs to be, which for myself, I've been going through this process of really needing to push through my work, really needing to do this. It's not something, let's say my human is really wanting to engage with. The other day I was absolutely, I think probably even saying out loud, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be this person. I want to go hide in the corner of some office and do a job and get paid for it and come home and spend time with my kids and be normal. And yet what feels like is occurring now for me, and I'm assuming for many people, many souls right now, is this feeling of walking between both worlds, right? So we are aware of the global situation and trying to manage that response within ourselves. And then we're also aware of all of the things we have been preparing for, experiencing over so many years, which is the understanding that there is something much greater than our human form and just these bodies that is present within us. And so now we're to this point where it's, how do we merge these two realities? And how do we step beyond what has always been this kind of existence that we have had to live within, without becoming an extremist, without becoming an alarmist? And that is one of the things I was dealing with last night, was feeling very frustrated. Frustrated that there really is no truth out there. And I don't normally go on Facebook. I happened to click on, I saw what I needed, and I clicked off, which was an article someone had posted and said, you know, I think this is really important to read. And of course it was about, so you can even, my energy starts to ramp up, right? The article started as, we are a team of doctors and we are concerned, da da da. So this was their version of the medical information, right? But all of that aside, what is most frustrating at this time is that there is so much information that is out there that has absolutely no credibility on both sides of the story, because then the other thing we see is this kind of spiritual perspective that this is all happening for a greater reason, that there are mass arrests, the economic reset, this kind of thing. And yet at both ends of the spectrum, there is no proof. There is no truth that is presenting, which makes any kind of sense right now. So as the average human going through this experience, I always tend to take a bit of the middle road. And I always tend to, I look at the extremes, I think about the extremes, and I always tend to come back lately to, but what is best for me now? And even if this is what is happening, the global structures are being broken down, I'm not running that. I'm not in the midst of that. I'm here. I'm here in this body. I have my family, my daily life. And even if there is a mass spiritual awakening that is occurring, I'm still here in this body, and it's my body that needs to come into alignment and understanding about who I am and what I'm doing here. And part of the frustration feels like we should be doing more than we are doing. And yet, just as I was saying yesterday or the other day in my last video, right now it is more about sorting through our own stuff, our own emotions, our own experiences. And as I have started to commune more with my own body, my own emotions, what is happening right here, things become clearer and clearer for myself. So even if there is a global outbreak of some sort of virus, what does that mean for me? The same things still apply. It's important that I get good rest. It's important that I eat healthy. It's important that I strengthen my immune system. So even if there is some sort of virus that is going to sweep the entire world, the only thing I can really do about it from here is to take care of my body, to take care of my children, and actually to increase the things that I have been starting to do, which is breathing exercises, focusing on positive energy, positive thoughts, positive things, rather than the negativity. And this isn't about spirituality. This is about proven body science. We know this with the brain. We know when we focus on being grateful, we increase the capacity of our immune system. And these things have been proven. And so I always say what is the best course of action? In either case, it's to continue the things that I've been working on. Continuing to support the body to function as best as it can. And using what I've been learning about the stress response in the brain and how that affects the body. It's no surprise that as soon as it was announced the schools would be closing in our area, both of my children were at home and started exhibiting symptoms of a cold, right? Sore throat, coughing, this kind of thing. All of this talk. And I said, okay, stop. We're not doing this. Tell your bodies to knock it off, right? That's not where we're going. Our minds are so powerful. But more than that, it's the impressions that we are receiving from the outer environments, that we are not totally aware that it's even affecting us. We know the media, we know listening, watching, reading affects us. And yet at some level, we also perhaps ignore it or don't. I'm not quite sure what the proper expression is. Don't take it quite so seriously as we should. You know, we all know we should exercise and eat healthy, but for the most part, it's about making it through the day, right? To have to do it all over again. And so to me, this is kind of where I feel I'm being pushed now to really focus on what is health, what is happiness. Because there really is no other choice right now, is what it feels like. Because even scrolling through anything, I can feel I'm not even in fear about it. I can feel the effect that it's having within my body. And yes, I've become much more sensitive over the last weeks, months, much more tuned in to how things affect me. And yet, that doesn't mean it didn't affect me before. I'm just more aware of it now. And the message keeps coming in stronger and stronger. To tune out from the airwaves and to tune in to the internal self. And it's not that I've done a whole lot of research on these subjects, but again, this morning, I'm having visions of and images and actually hearing propaganda and the blaring and the blasting. And really what I am reminded of is, World War II. And Germany. And the fact that people went along with what was being presented to them because they were in fear. And when you are in fear, it's hard to make rational, clear decisions. And of course, when you're not being presented with all of the facts, it can feel like you are in a no-win situation. And yet, it really does come down to trusting our gut and our inner knowing. I spoke about this a bit over the last year or so because it was a constant issue for myself with my son. So, and I feel it's appropriate to mention here, to bring up now, because the situation now is all said and done. We have to understand that the world is based on patterns and based on systems. And that everything that we call research is based on observation of patterns and collection of data. In support of those patterns. And if you even look at what's happening now, and this is why I was speaking of this article that I had seen, whatever end of the spectrum we are on, we are going to be drawn to information that supports that stance that we hold. So if we believe that the virus is some sort of weapon, some sort of bioweapon, and that perhaps it's also combined with the effects of 5G technology, that this is really what's causing the issue. It's not just the virus itself, it's that combined with other things in the environment. And perhaps that it would explain why we are having a different experience in one country versus another. But if that's where our belief lies, we will be drawn to that information that will support that theory. And if we also, on the other hand, perhaps believe this is a serious threat to our health. For example, my mother was over the other day and she was just kind of making a joke about, okay, we're the elderly, they're trying to keep us isolated, and saying, but this is good because we caught it early here, so it won't spread, this is good. We knew ahead of time, so this way it won't spread the way it's spreading in China. And I said, well, maybe not. And she said, well, I don't know. And she started telling me how her grandfather actually died of a flu. It was during one of these, I suppose it was a pandemic at the time, but during the war. And she was saying that actually a lot of the soldiers were dying and they weren't telling people. So for her, she felt like this was something good. That, being in that elderly category now, that it was good that they were aware of it so that they could stay home, protect themselves. And it is true. A lot of elderly people, what they really die of is pneumonia or flu symptoms, a flu virus, something like this. That just, they're already in a fragile state. And this is just what kind of does them in the end. So for her, in that sense, this makes a lot of sense, what is happening and what is going on. And she is perhaps even grateful for the measures that have been taken in that sense. So this is the way the world is. We have our perspectives. We have our personal situation. Right? Many mothers who have children who have ongoing health issues are grateful that this is happening. That we are being isolated or socially distanced from each other, depending on how you want to use that word, right, to your advantage. For your personal agenda. And even that word agenda has a negative connotation, right? What are you trying to accomplish by doing this? So, multiple, infinite possibilities and perspectives from which to come. But I was going to share with you my experience with my son, which was that, so he had pectus excavatum, which is basically the sunken chest. And for him, he had difficulty breathing. It was hard for him to do any kind of physical exercise. Even just walking, he could feel the effects of that. So he had this surgery where they put the bar in to expand the chest out. And about 9 months after the surgery, he started developing an abscess at the site of the incision where the bar was put in. And the first time this happened, of course, I'm coming from the perspective of not knowing anything about this, but the doctors, because this is their specialty, well aware that this is very dangerous, because if there is an infection, it spreads to the bar because the bar is a foreign material in the body. The infection will cling to that, right? And it spreads, and it develops what they call a biofilm. It's not just like having an infection within an organic substance. It's much harder to get rid of. So the chances of then having to remove that bar because of the film that develops from this organism are very high. So it was definitely a concern. And so they went about the normal way, which is to, drain it and give him lots of antibiotics to keep the infection at bay. But then this started happening over and over and over again. And we were at the hospital quite frequently. And the second time it happened, it was, okay, well, the wound didn't heal properly. We need to use a wound vac, right? So we don't have to go through this again. So we went through that process. And at that point, the infectious disease team was called in as well, to do some tests. And the thing was that I had to, as the mother of this individual, and you'll know this if you've ever had to deal with the medical community, it's you have to be your own advocate. You have to ask questions because they are coming from a perspective of this is what they do on a day-to-day basis, and they have their set protocol for how to approach these situations. And they were coming, the orthopedic surgery team, right? The individuals who put this bar in, they're coming from their perspective, which is that if an infection develops, it's highly dangerous and we need to move to take action right away, which meant antibiotics right off the bat. And an abscess to them was a sign of an infection. And yet the infectious disease team was telling me there is no infection. There's never been a sign of an infection. And until I actually questioned them and said, wait a minute, you're telling me there never was an infection. This isn't based on the fact that he started antibiotics right away. No, there's no infection. So I understand the surgery team coming from this perspective of we want to head this off, right? We want to make sure this doesn't develop. And yet that's not the story that was being told to me. And actually the assumption was because there was an abscess, it meant there was an infection. And yet when the tests were run, there was no infection. So, and I totally understand, except we went through this 5, maybe 6 times where he kept having this recurring abscess. It would go down, it would start to come up again, go down, start to come up again. And I'm, and it's fine for them because let's just give him antibiotics and make sure he doesn't get an infection. And yet this child at this age now, how many courses of antibiotics has he had, right? It's very, very damaging to the body itself. And yet nobody is sitting down and saying, look, here's the real situation. We don't know what's causing this. There isn't actually an infection. We do this as a protective measure, right? No one ever sat down and said this. I had to figure all this out myself. And if I hadn't started asking questions and getting upset and even defensive at times, because here is my child lying in this bed and they continue to pump this stuff, doing surgeries, anesthesia, probably unnecessarily, right? And again, I understand it's for protection. And yet he is the only one who has to live with this body for the rest of his life. And when we talk about a big system like a hospital, a medical network, in the end, it's about covering their asses. So taking all of this into consideration as well, right? That even the responses that I'm seeing with small businesses deciding to close and things like this, it's as if there is this pressure because the government has issued this statement, right? The CDC has put out these notices and da-da-da-da-da. And all the emails it keep seeing are saying things to the effect of, well, the most loving response we can have is to close our doors because we want to keep people safe and protect them, right? So there is also this sense of, because this is what was said, here's what we're going to do based on what we've been told. But we do have to account for the fact that what we are being told, perhaps, is not the full truth. And is there even such a thing as full or absolute truth? Really, there's not. Because we can look back in history. Oh, this is what we knew then. Now research is showing us X, Y, and Z. It's something totally different than we thought, right? In any scenario. So, and I say all this just to bring a sense of kind of normalcy and sanity to the situation, which is that We really don't know. And going to any kind of extreme does not serve us. And in fact, is actually affecting our bodies. We know the stress response, the trauma response in the body actually makes us sicker. And so at either end of the spectrum, we are doing a disservice to ourselves. And at the end of the day, for me, it's been about needing to connect from any of the information. And things like washing your hands and taking your vitamins and exercising and eating healthy are always important. So for those of us, though, that are experiencing this sense of where do I stand this side of it? Know that this is really what is going on in your energy field right now. What is that middle way for yourself, which is your truth based on understanding, right? And looking at the perspectives. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Again, we do have to be realistic and we do have to think critically about things. And in the end, it is what feels appropriate for us. And what can we do in these times? And right now it is about taking a step back, because right now we're in what I would say is the flaring, right, of all of this. Nobody knows, it's getting spun. And we know eventually more will come out. When I worked in the financial markets years ago, it was a big shock to me to realize that our country and our nation ran on lies. To me, before I got into that business, financial things scared me. I didn't understand them. They didn't make sense to me. But my whole perspective and reality shifted once I saw, now this was back in the day, right, where they still had people in the pits at the Board of Trade, and that our economy, right, the Dow Jones, the S&P, was based on people making these hand signals at each other. People yelling and screaming and throwing things. It was absolutely horrifying and shocking to me that I had been afraid of what felt like something that I would never understand, right? Impenetrable. But once I was part of the inside of that system, it was really crazy to see that this is nothing more than a system that has been set up. It's not truth, it's not reality, because it was created and designed to do something, to serve something, right? And yet life existed before that, but yet we've taken that on, and this is now how the world runs. And it would just continue to get reinforced to me, because the firm that I worked at did a lot of commodity trading. So they worked with a lot of farmers, a lot of investors. And, I live in the suburbs, but Chicago is right here. And if you know anything about it, the trading floors actually had, the walls were basically windows, right? It was open to the outside. You could see the outside in one area of it. And so they would be trading, wheat, grains, whatever, soybeans, corn. And weather was a big factor, because if we didn't have enough rain, if we had a drought, that affected the crops, right? Too much rain, that affects the crops. When it would rain in Chicago at the Board of Trade, it would affect the prices. You would see them raise or drop based on, what the weather was doing, what we needed, whatever. Okay, and the prices here are the prices everywhere. It's not just like Chicago-based commodities, but Chicago was a main center for commodity trading, right? And that affected across the country. So, across the world, actually. I mean, does that even make any kind of sense? Because it could be raining in Chicago and it could not be raining 30 minutes the other way. And there are, as far as I know, there are no crops in Chicago. So, but that's what was driving the markets. And yeah, it's probably different now because it's all electronic trading. But yeah, what is affecting that, right? I mean, it's based on behaviors and responses and patterns, which are not really reality. Even think about psychology, right? It's like it's a study of human behavior. And we see enough of a pattern that we say, okay, this is a thing. And now we have a manual that says if you exhibit this, this, and this, it means you are this. But is that true? Like, are these just labels that we're putting on things? And I question all of this now just because of what I have found about myself, about the fact that I've been living with what they would call PTSD, right? And how what I thought was my reality was that I just couldn't concentrate. I had anxiety, this kind of stuff, right? Like beating myself up because why can I not get my life together? Coming to find out, well, no, it's because of what my brain is doing. It's because of all the trauma I experienced. I'm living in a world that actually doesn't really exist except in my body. So what is reality? There's no such thing as a true reality because everyone walking on this planet is having a different experience, a different reality, a different truth. And that is what we have to keep in mind, right? That as all this information is kind of wafting through the airwaves here, whatever direction it's coming from, it is wanting us to align to that. Right? We see this all the time on social media too. If someone doesn't agree with something, right? It's like, like we're all just supposed to be in agreement. We're not all supposed to be in agreement. What is that? I mean, I guess some people might call it the one world order, the new world order, right? Where everyone is just, this is it, and we all follow that. But that's not who we are. We're all individuals. So, to be realistic for ourselves, what do we need for ourselves? What works for us? Yes, we're in a situation now where things have changed a bit. We have to make some adjustments. But that doesn't mean discarding who we are. And the more that I feel this now, that's what I feel. This is where the stress and the tension and the frustration and the anger starts to rise up. Because in many ways, this outer pressure is saying conform, 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 conform. And in many ways, our internal being is saying, yeah, but no. Yeah, no. That hurts now. It hurts to such a large degree that I have no choice but to come in here. I have no choice but to disconnect. I have no choice but to attune to myself. So this is what that, again, it always feels a bit like we would say walking between both worlds, or kind of bridging this crevasse in the earth, right? Like without falling in, how do we maintain our 3D reality, but also tune into our own light of who we are? It's a tricky situation right now, but this is what we are navigating. And for many of us this week, we have felt ourselves arriving fully, coming home into our own bodies, which is interesting. And I don't think it's a coincidence. And when this happens, it suddenly feels like nothing in our world fits. Like it has, to some degree, felt like we've been asleep this whole time. Even though things have been coming in, we've been waking up slowly, becoming aware of ourselves, knowing and understanding along the way, okay, this is a probability, right? And yet here it is now, and yet the shock of how we actually feel in these energies could not have been anticipated. I think for myself, I always felt that, okay, if something comes up, I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be able to maintain my center. And yet some of that was almost lip service, because I'm finding now, like, whoa, like this is real. Like I really have to turn off my phone. I really have to drink a lot of water and stop drinking coffee. Like I really have to eat healthy because I'm feeling it. And not only that, but we're clearing out any of the energies from the past that would have been connected to any of these kinds of, as I mentioned the other day, genocide, propaganda, control, authority, all these kinds of energies. So anytime I've been getting information from anyone and it's saying, oh, here's this, or here's that, or this is advice from so-and-so, or this, it's like, it's making me pissed to the point where I'm like, I'm not really pissed, but it's like internally, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, let me just delete this. Stop telling me what to think and how to feel. And also noticing that when someone is saying something to me that is incongruent with how I feel about what's going on right now, again, I'm having to hold my tongue, because it's increasing the agitation of the other person, that I'm not aligning to their belief. And it's not like I'm even intentionally trying to have a discussion about what's going on right now, right? But you have that, there is that underlying sense that people want reassurance. They want reassurance that what they are feeling and experiencing is where you are. Join me here so that I can feel okay, which is how life is, right? Like I said, we find facts to support our stance, and that's what we go with. We isolate from people who do not agree with that perspective. And this isn't just now, this is just human nature, right? You become who you most associate with. We've heard this before. right? If you want to make a lot of money, then you need to hang out with people who are making a lot of money. This is nothing new. And yet it's all kind of coming up in our face right now. That you actually can manifest your thoughts and your feelings. And that we can actually manifest a global demise. And yet human nature is constantly fighting against that, right? And this is that feeling that we have all lived with for so long. Every human being, right? Like, there's always something happening in the world where we have to pick ourselves up again. So by nature, humanity is against our demise. And yet we see these forces every day that are coming in. And this isn't to say there's even a conspiracy or controlling energies, right? But we see this and we say, like, oh, everything always has a tendency towards chaos, right? No matter how many times I clean my house, I need to continue to do it again, right? This is just the nature of our world. These aren't, you can label them, right? Conspiracy theories, spiritual agendas, things like this. A lot of it is recognizing these are patterns within the earth here. That we are a part of by default as a human experiencing this. And yet knowing that we can choose our own patterns and our own responses. We know this. We know this. It has nothing to do with spirituality. Although we can call it that if we want to, right? But science has proven that. We can change our brains. We can change our own realities. So there's nothing new that's happening here right now. It's just the degree to which we are feeling it being impressed to us. And I was even thinking about the Industrial Revolution, right? Was really the start of this. Well, I don't really know where that would fall on the timeline. But to me, it was a curious time. Because on one hand, humanity saw the possibility of a better world, right? But the way that it went about it was just totally in contrast to what the human body needs. It really missed the machine age. But I was remembering how in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, at least in Chicago, all of a sudden all these factories, right, started springing up and people were working around the clock. And it was dangerous and unhealthy, and there were no labor laws back then, and children were working in factories, and people were dying. But it was like, well, this is all for the greater good. Like, look what we have now. We have mass production. Things are cheaper. Things are more accessible. And yet, at the same time, they were having to, well, now we would call it busing, right? But taking children out to the country on the weekends, on wagons, because they were so ill, because the air was so dirty and polluted. So it's really nothing new. In many ways, our world is much better than it ever has been. Most of us have access to clean water, electricity, a warm bed to sleep in. Life expectancy is much higher than it was. So we have a lot to be grateful for. And yes, there is also that component though where we feel more controlled now than ever about what we think and what we feel. And yet, is that a result of the fact that, if you lived out in the country, you didn't have contact with a lot of people. If you went to the store, perhaps yes, and perhaps there was ways of getting news, but it wasn't a 24/7 experience. So are we in fact creating this feeling of control for ourselves by continuing and insisting on being tapped in to what is happening in the world? You say murder is nothing new. We just know more now about it because it's reported all the time. So what is the reality of what is going on here? And how much does it really matter for us as individual humans? It's interesting because I used to laugh when I was involved in the financial markets, right? I became very interested in investing. And I thought, oh my God, my whole family needs to know about this. Like, it was so important to me, right? Like, it's not that challenging. Look, you can figure this out. Save your money, build your investments, this kind of thing. And like, my family at the time just wasn't picking up on it, right? I thought it was so weird. Like, this is so cool. It's not a mystery. It's not a secret. And now I've kind of distanced myself from all of that. And now I've been kind of getting, hey, have you looked at your investments? Hey, are you saving money? Hey, are you doing this? Like, there's a lot of concern, right, about my future, which is understandable. But it's interesting to me at different points in our lives and at different points in other people's lives, what is important based on where we are at in our reality and our experience. So it's all changeable and movable. And again, it comes back to what is important for you. And there is that component of, well, if you are in denial about your situation and your needs and what you need, that does become an issue. But the only one who can help you with that is you. And it's the same for the energy work too, right? Like, if we want to bypass, we're going to bypass. And most times it's just a matter of when are we suddenly in enough pain where it's too much and we have to start to face what is really going on and face the truth. So, but again, it's our own truth, right? We are the only ones who would experience what we experienced as a form of a crisis. So we kind of blow the whole thing wide open and accept that all of this is a possibility. And yet, so what if it is? Right now, this is what matters. And none of these individuals are going to come into your house and take care of you and pay your bills and clean your house and feed you food that you need to, eat to keep yourself healthy. And if you don't take care of yourself, none of them are going to come in to save you, right? So that's great that you think that mass arrests are happening, and that's great that you think that this is a really serious viral epidemic. What does that mean for me? Number one, fear doesn't help. Number two, I have to take care of my body. Number three, everyone is living their own reality. And then I will just add to that, it's my own perspective, that this is what's going on for a lot of souls right now. Where am I landing? What's really happening? What does this mean for me? So I also just wanted to take a few moments to talk about the power of the earth, the power centers that are here. I spoke about this a little bit the other day, that maybe I didn't. Maybe it was in my meditation. I don't remember. But that you are a soul who has been here before. And that you have planted seeds for your return. I used to think about how wonderful it would be if I had thought about this and made a box for myself and buried it under a tree, where when I would come back in my next life, all of my answers would be in that box, right? Like, here's what you need to remember for yourself in this lifetime. So you don't have to go through this all over again, always forgetting, always forgetting. But the truth is, we did do that. But it's in the form of energy. It's in the form of codes, if you want to call it that. And you can tap into that by virtue of tapping into the earth through your light, through your energy field. And I know most of us aren't trusting that right now. It's really hard to trust that when we are faced with, but should I be paying attention to this reality? And yet part of why I went through this whole thing was to share with you, but look at all the ways that this can and cannot be an actual reality. And that you have, that you have prepared yourself for this return here in this lifetime. So these are the kinds of things I work with in our group sessions. Just so happens today is Thursday, and it is also the equinox, which, to be honest, usually these things are on my radar. So it's kind of funny to me that it happens to land on this evening. So I will be doing that 7 p.m. Central every Thursday. But tonight for sure, tapping into the energies you put here for yourself. That secret message box, perhaps, buried beneath the tree. With all of the things that perhaps your younger self needed to know. We are here to create a different reality. And it's about one that is connected to our internal world, our internal knowing, rather than being directed by external messages. We each came here with our own plan, our own intentions for this lifetime. And a lot of what we're hearing and feeling is just overwhelming because it's pressure from the outside. And even though we don't feel like we're necessarily in fear, there is still this sense of stress in the body. But to me, this is what this really is, because we're looking for that why, what is going on. Connect, it's to connect to your own light, to your own truth of your reality. That you had planned for yourself. Because so much of what we hear is that your reality only matters if it matches up with other realities that have already been created. In the sense of making lots of money, acquiring things, right? Successful business. If you do that, that is accepted. That's desired. What about peace and prosperity of being? That is also valid. And in these times, even more important. So I invite you to connect into the truth of your soul, your light. Not because it sounds good, not because it sounds peaceful, not because it's a way of stepping away from the insanity of what we're feeling, but because this is even what we are being pushed to do. And by virtue of all of this coming from the outside, to connect more into that, this is what we're feeling. It's worse. We feel worse to connect and try to find answers there. So really there's no argument or discussion as far as I'm concerned. It's just not an answer anymore. And this is really what we're feeling here now. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take good care. We'll talk soon.